Well, welcome. Tonight, I have the pleasure of speaking with somebody that's been too long, an old friend of Milford who did a lot of good things in Milford and still helping us out. Why don't we start with an introduction?
Dick Moore, and I'm a former member of the Massachusetts Senate. I represented Milford for about 20 years in the Senate. Now Milford's in a different Senate district. The last redistricting, Milford and Bellingham got pushed into a district that's based the current senators from Needham. So it's a bit of a change than what the towns that I represent. I had those towns and going all the way out to Southbridge, and so those towns to the west are still part of the district, but it's a whole different operation today.
Well, the amazing one was the House, when Richie Neal went from Milford to Springfield.
Yeah. Well, now he actually has a bigger territory now than he did then, because he's got more of the west. He's got almost all of Western Mass, with the exception of Jim McGovern has a little stretch into Northampton, and they're a very active group in the Five College area and stuff, and they're a demanding constituency on issue stuff, not so much on constituent service, but every issue they'd be in talking to McGovern today about Venezuela and Israel and Gaza and all of the international issues that are important, but also there are people that have other issues like how do we pay the food bill or the heating bill and stuff today, and that they have to, and McGovern, who happens to represent Uxbridge where I am, when he first went in, got on the Agriculture Committee, stayed on it, although his principal job is on the Rules Committee. He's been chair and he's ranking Democrat on the Rules Committee, which controls the flow of every bill and how much debate is had on it.
Well, Ways and Means had a little bit to say about
Well,
it.
that's the other probably major committee. Well, two other committees: Ways and Means, which does with Social Security, and taxes and all that stuff, which Richie Neal is ranking member, and if the Democrats were to take the House back, will be chairman again, assuming he's reelected, which I think is a pretty good chance. And appropriations is the other one, and I think and then the other important post we have in Massachusetts is Catherine Clark, who served with me in the state Senate. Now in Congress, she's the minority whip, the number 2 Democratic spot, and she's got probably a good chance of becoming Speaker someday. Massachusetts has had, over the course of the 250 years now of history, has had 8 speakers of the House from both parties, the most recent being Tip O'Neill, but it goes back. Joe Martin, who was had some of this area. Remember, he represented Hopedale when I was in high school, had been Speaker.
That always amazed me that a Republican could be governor. Because you sit there and say, if all 12 Republicans in Massachusetts got together and voted.
Yeah, I think it's the voters in Massachusetts are pretty smart, and sometimes because the legislature is heavily Democratic, still it's been that way for 30 years, actually since the time of Jack Davern from Milford, when he was Speaker. Just before him, Tip O'Neill had it for a while. It went back Republican for a term, then it's been Democrat ever since. And I think sometimes a Republican, generally it's a Republican who is kind of a moderate by standards that can get enough votes, and it depends on who the Democratic candidate is. If they don't pick a strong one, or one that and one that doesn't have any baggage, so. And sometimes the person that gets the nomination in the primary has some issues that are
Well,
hard
you
to
were
explain.
always a centralist.
I felt the district was that way for the most part, and I tried to represent what I thought the average person in this area, Milford and the surrounding towns, would probably do if they had to make a decision on some of these issues.
Well, I always got a kick out of when John Fernandez said his first days on the Hill, Steve was asked, how does he feel being the conservative on the committee he was on? And he said, if I'm a conservative, what does that make Dick Moore, a Republican?
Well, I did vote with him a few times. If I thought the issue was not not really in the interests of the people I represented, then I would vote Republicans, even though the chances of them winning an issue are pretty slim.
But in my mind, that's what we need. We need legislators who vote the issues,
Yeah.
not dogma.
And that's the problem in Congress today. And it's really pretty much in both parties, although more so right now the Republicans, because they have both the House and Senate and the White House, and they're really letting the president do whatever he wants, and that's not the way the founding fathers or others had envisioned it. They wanted some checks and balances, and that's why I think sometimes a Republican can win in Massachusetts, because they're looking for that balance between an overwhelming majority in the legislature and the governor, who might at least come up with a different view. But during the time that I was in, and I'm sure still, it didn't matter whether the governor was Republican or Democrat. If the legislature intended to do something, they had the votes to override a veto. They didn't do it all the time, but they would. The governors, even Democratic governors, had to be somewhat careful about what they were doing, that it couldn't be too far afield, or they would have a problem with the legislature.
But do you see it lasting more than the midterm elections?
I think it'll change. At least the House probably will go back to be Democratic. I mean, it's hard to project because of a couple of elections this year, New Jersey and Virginia being the primary ones, and even New York City. But where Democrats won by a pretty substantial margin, there's a concern that the current president is not doing what he promised he would do. He was going to change the economy on day one for the better. It's gone for the worse. He wasn't going to get involved in any foreign wars. Looks like he's certainly skirting around the edges of those. And so it's I think the Democrats, for the most part, don't like him. The key, which is the majority of voters, are independent, at least by being designation. And they were with him, or a majority of them were with him for the election. But they're polling anyway to the degree that is reflective. And a poll is really just a snapshot in time. It doesn't give you a lot of...
But when you say the Democrats don't like the current president, is that like saying Hiroshima was a minor inconvenience to the afternoon tea?
It would compare to that. Yeah. No, it's. I think it's sad that America was it was, and still to some degree is, a world leader, but we're pulling back from alliances which have been tested over time to be in our benefit. I mean, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was formed largely by the United States and Europe after World War II, or as a result of the alliances in World War II. The only time and they have a rule that if one member of NATO, if one country in NATO gets attacked, all the others will.
Section 5 already comes to the defense.
And the only country that's ever needed that is us. When in 9/11, when we were attacked by a terrorist organization, and all of the members of NATO rallied with us. And we haven't gone. While we have been paying, we're paying less now in dues, but we were covering a lot of it, partly because we were healthier economically than many of the other countries. But I think it's coming more to a balance in the other countries now, because they also recognize that we may not bail them out all the time, are stepping up with their defense.
Do you believe that Trump really wants out of NATO, or is he just using his voice to get them to pay more?
I don't know. He's talked about it. He's certainly pushed it. I don't know. A lot of things he says he doesn't do. Some things he says, or he doesn't say, he does. So it's. Well,
it seems like he's got a style that he comes in there and churns up the bushes and then cuts the deal.
Yeah.
So, as far as giving up on NATO, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't think it does. And I think it's to our detriment. Russia's still a concern, even though their economy is terrible now, because the war, they thought they were going to take over Ukraine in a week. It's been 4 years now, and it still hasn't been solved. And I don't think they can settle it, that Putin, as long as he's running the show over there, wants to take some land. And that's the worst thing to do, is for Ukraine to give him land, because then you want more.
Well, Putin has said he's all for stopping the war,
Yeah.
as long as I get what I want.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a problem that he's, and there are fewer people that were around during World War II than today. I was a kid, I was 2 years old during that. But we should have learned a lesson, our country should have learned a lesson in the late 1930s, when Britain and France agreed to let the Germans take, they took Austria. They agreed to let them take the Sudetenland, which had German heritage, but had been part of basically France and Czechoslovakia.
But who would really believe that you give a bully an inch and they won't want a foot?
Yeah, and they've lost 1 million people, and mostly military. They've had to borrow troops from the North Koreans, although it doesn't seem like they've done all that well. So it's a terrible mess, and sadly, the difference seems to me is that the Russian attack is now on civilians, hospitals, apartment buildings, and stuff, churches even, and the Ukrainians are targeting their attacks. They'll blow up a car that has a couple of generals in it, or they'll focus on military installations, warships and stuff, more so than, I think they've got the right strategy of trying to avoid civilian casualties, because, these people are struggling to get along and shouldn't be killed indiscriminately.
What's your take on Venezuela?
I think most of it's about the oil. That they have a lot of oil. It's not being used very well because they nationalized the companies, and so there's no. But what worried me was the president has said he talked to the oil companies before and after the attack to get the president of Venezuela. He didn't talk to Congress beforehand. Something's wrong there in that equation.
Do we have the right to go in and disrupt another country?
International law, no. I don't know that we have any legitimate claim to the boats we've been blowing up or the tankers we've been capturing. We're not technically at war. Congress has the power to vote.
But Congress has to declare war.
Yeah, but they haven't, and the president doesn't intend to ask them, it appears. So it's a mess that the Supreme Court, while they've had some flashes of courage, I think made a big mistake in basically saying that the president's immune from any illegalities while he's in office, because there's some things going on that are not legal and healthy and need to be addressed, and some of the foolish stuff, simple stuff. It's not foolish to him, I guess, but putting his name on everything, on the Kennedy Center, on the Peace Institute, because he wants to get the Nobel Peace Prize, and he's so upset because Obama got it and he didn't get it, and it's a big ego thing, and it's not to the good of the country, and we're all paying for it.
Well, I don't think history will change. I mean, if you look at the trend, the party in power tends to lose a few seats in the House at the midterms. Well, that's okay if you got 20 or 30 seats to your side.
Yeah, but when it's 2 or 3.
When it's 2 or 3, if they just stay with history, the trifecta is going to go away in a year.
Yeah, I think the odds are, things could obviously change, but the odds are, if the president continues to do what he's doing, and I don't see any pushback from his own party to get him to change, I think the House will shift fairly dramatically Democratic. Senate's a little tougher because there are only a third of the seats that are up any given election. And it may be, even if the Democrats were to take back the U.S. Senate, it would still be a very close vote. And because President Trump wants to eliminate the filibuster, but the Republicans don't want to do that because they understand that if they end up in the minority, that's your only lever to try to slow things down at least, if not prevent a bad bill from getting through. So
I can't imagine why they'd support eliminating the filibuster, because eventually you're going to be in the minority.
Yeah.
May not be this term, it may not be next term, but eventually, that was supposed to be the governor that limited, fast changes.
Yeah, and that branch is, because of the way it's set up, is designed to kind of slow things down. I think it was Jefferson explained it to one of the presidents who was an ambassador at the time, and why they did the House and Senate the way they did. I said, well, it's like a cup of tea. You pour a little into the saucer to let it cool sometimes. And so the House, because it's directly elected by the people at the time, the Senate wasn't, but now it is. But it's all elected at the same time. They might, some radical idea or whatever is radical, depends on people's perspective, but whatever that is, it could get passed in the House under certain circumstances. But it then has to go to the Senate, and the Senate was designed so that it would slow things down a little bit so that people could consider better what's going on. And that was in a time when communication was not what it is today. I mean, today it's instant sometimes. And today the problem is, and it was a problem back then too, can you trust the community, the words you're getting? And now with automated intelligence, they can make somebody's picture say what they want it to say, not what the person would actually believe.
The whole AI use, when I look at what I see on social media, half the times this is not right.
Yeah. Well, it's got good and bad. I've used it a few times. And I haven't paid for any of it. You can get some of it free. But like I'll write an article, and then I'll say, can you make this a little punchier, a little more? And it comes back usually pretty good. Some of them are not as good on visual stuff. ChatGPT seems to be better on visuals than Copilot. But but I found the interesting. We had a speaker. I'm a trustee at Nichols College. Have been for quite a long time now. And we had a speaker from Worcester who runs a company helping companies adapt to the use of automated intelligence, AI. And he gave an example, and I looked it up afterwards on the internet. And what he was saying was correct, that they ran a test in healthcare. They had, let's say, 6 doctors who used their own experience and knowledge and whatever else they use to diagnose illnesses. And they had another 6 that did it, but they used AI as a supplement to their judgment. The doctors who were using all their own information and experience were 20% right. AI doctors were 80% right. And when you're doing a diagnosis, some of that stuff, if you get it wrong and you say, oh, it's okay, and the time goes by, and especially if it's cancer or something, the person could be beyond treatment. And so I think there's a use for it. I think it's got and there's certainly plenty of misuses for it. But there are uses in business and certainly in healthcare where it can supplement the human mind. I don't think it can yet, at least it's not at the level where it can now replace it. Maybe someday it will, but it's not there yet. And I don't think it's good to have it totally on a computer base. There is a human factor that I think needs to be.
Well, when I was reading up on some of the things you're up to, I noticed a quote that said, the system is working, the health system is working exactly the way it was designed. The design was not right.
which is, and that's in the area that I've been working in the last decade or so at least, in long-term care. We have a system that was basically designed over 50 years ago, basically the nursing home industry, in which there's a lot of money and there's a lot of influence. You know, there are two long-term care lobbyists for every member of Congress, and so and they're not shy about spending money in order to protect what they have. So it's an industry that needs regulation, but every year the owners of nursing homes and the owners big companies that own nursing homes will come into Congress or into the legislature and say we need more money and less regulation. Well, the problem is they have regulations because there have been screw-ups along the way, and they need those to protect the residents of the nursing homes. And they have in the financials. First, they don't like to tell you very much about their finances, other than, oh, we're broke and we need money. But and this isn't true with every nursing home, but 2/3 of the nursing homes are for profit, and many of those are private equity firms, investments.
But now sorry to interrupt, but that is confusing to me, because I keep hearing, and we had the situation in Milford, we can go into it, where you can't break even. But private equity usually is pretty smart about what they invest their money in. Why would private equity firms invest in nursing care if they're all losing money?
They wouldn't. That's the problem. There's an issue, it's called related third parties. The company that owns a bunch of nursing homes will come in, and especially if it's private equity, or the other version of that is a real estate investment trust. They will buy their nursing home. They will sell the land to themselves, basically, but at a separate company, but the same owners. And then they can charge whatever
Then they can lease back.
And the same, then they lease it back. The same, they'll have a management company that oversees the administrator and other staff in the nursing home. They can charge, the management fees can charge whatever they want, because they run the company. They run the nursing home and they run the company. And so a nursing home could have 3 or 4 companies they're dealing with. And it's not like like the town has to go out usually for 3 bids on a project. They don't have to go out for any bid. They have to pay whatever that company that they own tells them to pay. So they can make their balance sheet look poor, but the company overall is making a lot of money.
Well, we were one of the, I think, 2 municipalities that ran a nursing home. And I got to admit, I loved Countryside when my mother finally got caught with dementia. You know, it caught up to her, and we couldn't watch her 24 hours a day. You know, she'd be sitting there, she'd go to the bathroom, and all of a sudden, a couple minutes later, she's gone.
Yeah.
So she fell down the stairs it was a lot of things that her safety was the reason we finally put her at Countryside. But it was 15, like $1,000 a month for the memory care unit.
Yeah. Memory care is important, but even with memory care, you can have a lot of people with dementia. It's tougher with Alzheimer's. It's more severe usually than basic dementia, but you could live in home, but you've got to right service, home care. It's a drain on relatives, certainly, to do that, so you have to have some help with home care. But in fact, the group that I helped start, and I'm still working with, called Dignity Alliance, was part of a lawsuit. About 2 years ago, we sued the state.
Is that Masters versus Healy?
Masters versus Healy. It was actually Masters versus Baker, but then when Healy got elected, they had to change the names. But basically, the federal court agreed with the plaintiffs, which we were part of, that there are a lot of people in nursing homes that don't need to be there if they can. They need housing and with services, home care, not necessarily 24/7 services, but some kind of help. And the judge ordered that over the next 8 years, which is really now the next 7 years, that 2,400 people had to be removed from nursing homes and back into the community. And they said at least that many. And the administration is slow walking that, so it could end up going back to court, because they're saying, well, we can't put them in the community because it won't be safe for them. Well, they might not be that safe in the nursing home either, because these nursing homes are not well staffed. They're understaffed. People are waiting they want to go to the bathroom. They need help getting out of bed. The call buttons ring for hours sometimes. They need to get out of bed so they don't have bed sores. They need to be walked around so they don't weaken, but somebody has to do that. But the nursing homes in general don't want to pay a living wage to the people that work there. And some of them, in the last 20 years or so, have been immigrants, and because they would take a job that's low pay and hard work and responsible. Some of the ones that have been in the country longer say, well, I can go and work at McDonald's or at Burger King and get paid more than a direct care worker at a nursing home and not have all that responsibility. You know, somebody else is responsible for the food quality. All I got to do is smile and get the fries and drink to the person. So they really need to look at making it a job that's worthwhile, because part of the problem is not just getting people, but keeping them. Because the turnover in some nursing homes can be within up to 100% in a year. And that's not good for the residents either, because they get used to meeting.
They're going through a tough time with dementia.
And to see a new face every other day or something isn't a healthy arrangement.
Well, I remember it was traumatic for us because my mother had lived with us. Well, my darling bride saved her life. When my dad passed away, we were in Washington, and I came home and she said, you know, your mother has to move in with us. And I was like, I didn't know how to ask. But my mother would have been dead within a year.
Yeah.
She's a Portuguese mother. I'm an only child. Having her in Milford and visiting her once a month from Washington, she would have withered away. So she was with us for 33 years. But at the end, we physically couldn't keep her safe because you had to have somebody watching her every minute of the day.
No, because you need constant oversight. Now, some of that probably over time would get resolved. You know, you can have monitors and things that can help. But you want to.
Dick, we tried to monitor at night. We put up the child gate on the second floor.
Yeah.
My mother would wake up at 2 a.m, slap the monitor, and run back to bed. It was just to prove that, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, so it just physically we couldn't figure a way of doing it. Luckily, we had Countryside, which is 2 miles from home.
Yeah.
Because friends of mine who have parents and grandparents in nursing homes, they have to drive 40 minutes each way.
Well, and there's some, what our concern with the Department of Public Health, which oversees nursing homes, is that they need to do a better job of when a nursing home has to close, because what happens usually is they have to close because the company's drained all of their assets, rather than that they're not getting paid enough. And the state doesn't do a good job overseeing. The nursing home is supposed to find
new placement
that's at least as good as where they are. And that's not always easy. And usually it's far away from their family and friends. So they need to, that's why the preference really would be to do as much as we can to keep people at home unless they need that 24/7 coverage. And even there, it could be done in a more humane way than I think we do it in many places. I think the trend for the future is smaller homes, smaller nursing homes, with maybe a dozen or so or 15 around a central core, kitchen and stuff, and the staff as they do in group homes with people with various disabilities. The staff sometimes will live there or be there, at least someone's there around the clock to respond to a problem that might occur. And we need to do more of that with older adults as well, who particularly have dementia and Alzheimer's.
Well, we were very pleased with the services and the way they took care of my mother. She's there till the day she died. But realistically, she was on Mass Health.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding was it was back then $300 a day average cost to keep somebody.
More than that.
Well, now, but Medicaid only paid $250 a day average. Medicare paid like $280.
Yeah, and Medicare doesn't cover the long term for the most part. They'll cover if you're in and out of the hospital and stuff. You're covered in the hospital and covered for a while for like rehab or things, but they don't want to cover long term, which is then Medicaid. And the problem with the spend down, and they spend around $2,000 for a long time, and the inflation factors mean that $2,000 is worth a lot less than it used to be, and needs to be adjusted to inflation. One of the issues that we've been dealing with is there's a thing called personal needs allowance, and it's
Is that $78 or?
$72.80 with Massachusetts. It varies by the state. The Congress in 1987 set it at $30. They haven't changed it since. And so 40 years practically have gone by, and the cost of living is going to and the nursing home doesn't private everything. The residents still needs, if they need a coat for winter, or they need to go, if they go outside, be taken out somewhere.
Well, they need clothes.
They need shoes if they're going to walk, because they need to get up and exercise a little bit. Sometimes I've seen some residents have told us they order out for a pizza because they can't stand the food they're getting. But so they need money. That $30 has stayed the same. The state has been the $72.80 since 2008. So for 20 years, has been the same level. It's not indexed to inflation, which is a big problem. And so the value of that $30 40 years ago is maybe $10.
Yeah, but even $70
isn't enough
for a month. That's $2 and something a day.
And one woman told us she's in a rest home, she qualified for the thing, so she can get out a little bit. She wanted to buy a new winter coat because she is able to get out and people go on the bus to the stores and stuff. She had to save up for 3 or 4 months before she had enough, and shoes were expensive too. Another thing. A lot of them want to have a cell phone to talk to their grandchildren and their family, and some even do the internet. And so all of those things come up to more than the $72. The highest state supplement is Alaska. They had some oil up there, so they have $200, which is the maximum the federal government will allow a state to supplement. So the federal government's not paying enough at the base, and they're not letting states, if they wanted to or could, to pay more.
Yeah, I remember we used to she had an account.
Yep.
And we would put money in every month.
And that's another way for families to help out if they want to, sure.
Well, it was the only way, because if you sit there and say $70, $2 a day,
It's nothing.
nothing.
Doesn't buy a cup of coffee at McDonald's. You can still get it for about $1, but you certainly can't go to a regular coffee shop for $2 as coffee is.
But you also mentioned the issue that we want more highly trained medical care providers, but we're paying them. I mean, I always found the amount we pay them was ridiculous.
Yeah, it's at or just barely above minimum wage, and these are responsible positions. They're taking care of human beings.
They're taking care of our mothers, our fathers,
yeah.
and yet you can make more money learning to say, do you want fries with that?
And what happens with the big companies when they come in and buy the nursing home, for private equity, the way you make money is you cut staff. Staffing the salaries are a big portion of the cost of operating the nursing home. And so the parent company ends up not hiring vacancy or letting people go in some cases. And certainly not paying them a decent wage, and not always giving them the training they need to do the job right, because they want to send it back to the investors. And we need to take care of the people first before we take care of the investors.
But where does that money come from?
For the investors, well,
No, not from the investors. I could care less about that.
it comes from there's basically two big sources. One is private pay. There's still, if you have money, some money, even if you're not really wealthy, but you have to spend down to that
$2,000.
And so if somebody has a house, there's some money there that gets attached, and they end up having to sell it. And so a portion of it is private pay. The Medicaid largely, and to some degree Medicare, but Medicaid, big one, will provide payment. The problem is Medicaid, even if the nursing home person said they're not paying enough, well, I think given the other way, if we looked at what their other parts of their company are charging, they would be getting a lot better than what they think they're getting. But it's a problem that the Medicaid will give, the federal government rates nursing homes based on their quality of care and the outcomes of the care. They have a star rating, 1 to 5 stars, 5 being the best, 1 being the certainly subnormal care. And the payments from both the federal government, half of it's federal, half of it's state money, taxpayers in both cases. The problem is that the 1-star nursing home gets the same rate per bed as the 5-star. So
There's no incentive to increase quality.
No to increase quality or to even pay attention to it. If you don't have to pay for it, if you're going to get the same amount of money for every head, basically on head count.
Well, when we ran into the issue here in Milford, we all love having countryside a mile or two away.
Yeah.
It made life so much easier to come home from work. 5 minutes later, I could be with my mother. For a young family, that's doable. If you got kids with soccer, with all the things, and you got to drive 2 hours, an hour there, an hour back, it makes it a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
But it used to be that Medicaid didn't pay the bills. It was $50, $60 less a day than it cost. Medicare was close, but you had private pay.
Mm-hmm.
Like when my mother had her
helped to
knees replaced,
Yeah.
she went into nursing home for it was either a week or 2 weeks
Rehab.
for rehab, and that was $600 a day private pay,
Hmm.
or rehab pay, insurance pay, and that made up for it. But the trend we found out was that the insurance companies, they used COVID as their baseline, and now they're trying to do everything as outpatient or 1 day in the hospital. So the funding source that made up for the low Medicare, Medicaid seems to have disappeared.
Yeah, I don't think anybody, any authority, federal or state governments, have really looked at the whole picture of whether what Medicaid or and Medicare, depending on what the issue is, pays, but also looking at the finances of the nursing home itself. Nobody wants to tell you who owns them. It's hard to. The state sometimes has, you can trace. I went to a conference last fall, and an attorney who goes into this kind of business of nursing homes showed on a real estate trust, there were like about 5 or 6 levels of you didn't know who really owned the company. But the part that was making money had no legal ownership, but they controlled all of the other companies. So it's important for the state and the federal government to have a better understanding of the financing, require the information to be provided, and to do
Well, we ran into an issue here where Countryside lost $2.5 million one year. The next year, they lost $2 million. They couldn't make that up. But we had these long debates at the Finance Committee because we all love Countryside and the services they provide and the fact that they're right here. But our budget, take $2 million out, you're putting that burden on
Yeah.
people on Social Security.
And part of the problem there is, like, in the case of Countryside, it is a one-owner operation, basically. The town, through the authority,
Right.
owns it. And many of the nursing homes now are multi-nursing home, the company owns 4, 5, 6, or 100 in some cases across the country. So Countryside doesn't have the other options that that a fully private nursing home would have to create these other entities.
Yeah, and
that
to their credit, it looks like they turned over. You know, they made it to where now they haven't asked the town for money for years. But you sit there and say, it's a tough position because, in one hand, if you increase taxes, you know, $2 million was $80 a resident in Milford, a homeowner. So you're charging $200 extra on the tax rate. Well, people who are living on Social Security, people who built Milford, some are living on $2,000 a month. You start taking that extra $200 a year out,
Yeah.
and it's
It hurts.
significant.
Yeah.
So we were caught between, how do we balance, we want to help, and then you had the additional problem that half of the people at Countryside are not Milford. So Milford taxpayers,
Yeah, and there should be a way to try to address that issue. But the hard choice that you'd face on that is you could, or the authority could, there might be some legal steps here, but theoretically could sell the business to a bigger entity. But then you lose even more control of the ability to serve
but
local
what's
people.
kept Countryside is the fact that if you look at the board,
Yeah, it's
they're local people.
Yeah.
They're people there with their mothers, their grandmothers, their family
Yeah.
there.
And so it's an issue where you've got the opportunity to get local residents to provide the service in a fairly close proximity to their family. And if they didn't have, if another company owned that owned other nursing homes around the state, you wouldn't have that kind of opportunity.
Vested interest.
Right. So it comes down, and it isn't fair for Milford taxpayers to pay for other.
Well, half of the $5 million we gifted Countryside was taking care of people not in Milford.
Yeah.
And on the Finance Committee, we got a lot of people griping at us, saying, you know, the towns around us should chip in. Yeah, they should, but can they?
Yeah. It would require like a regional compact or some sort, like the vocational school.
Like BVT, where
Yeah.
13 towns all chip in.
Yeah, and even there, the complaints that one town doesn't have enough seats to meet the need compared to another town, and they go into that. And now it's the change that state law was passed in the last couple of years. It used to be the director and the committee could have more influence over who got in there. Now it's a lottery
At BVT.
at BVT and all the other vocational schools.
Yep.
There's one in Franklin that.
Well,
covers-
Milford's moving towards Chapter 74 to have vocational education in the new high school. And that's nothing against BVT. I mean, BVT's become a
They
magnet
can't take
school.
care of everybody that wants it.
But, people, I've said it many times, people like my father, put him in an organic chemistry class, he's not going to do well.
Yeah.
Give the man a tool. He's an artist.
But we don't have any, course, it's ancient history when I was in high school, but we used to have home economics.
Yep.
It was mostly for women, but guys could do it, to learn how to cook and do other things domestically. You had shop.
Well, I took typing in high school, and
well, I took
everybody
typing too,
laughed,
because-
saying,
and-
"Why do you need typing?" Today, typing's probably the strongest thing because of the
Yeah.
computers.
Right, well, and I was happy that I took typing, that, if you're gonna go on to college, you have to be able to type, and now it's a computer typing, it's word processing at least, if not more extravagant than that. But the typing helps you to adjust to the computer, and I'm sure now the typing is at least word processing, if not
Yeah.
a computer itself.
But
So-
how does the average person, you hear that the average person has $200,000 in retirement savings, 78, 80 grand a year average to be in a nursing home,
Oh, yeah, easily.
and if
And
it's,
that's not, the problem we found in COVID, it was not unknown before COVID, but COVID really amplified it, is when you have infections that are viral infections, if you're in the room with somebody else and one is sick and you're not, you're going to get it.
you're gonna get it.
And on top of that, there's no privacy and we actually have, the State Department of Public Health tried to limit, and does to some degree, limit nursing homes to no more than 2 people per room, which isn't too bad, but if you come from a home where you've had your own room, and now you're serving with a stranger who from time to time changes because somebody gets sick or dies, there's a real lack of privacy. If they want to watch television all night, it's a problem.
And you're a light sleeper.
Yeah. So ideally, and we should figure out a way to pay for this with government help primarily, but also with for quality of care, to have a single room unless, if a married couple wants to
Yeah.
go together or something. But even.
Well, we used to joke.
There
when-
are 31 nursing homes that didn't want to abide by that. They wanted 3 and 4 people per room.
Wow.
And they sued the state, and so far, and it's been sitting in the court for 3 or 4 years now.
Well, when kids were young, I used to joke about, we're sending them to the incubator. Because they went off to elementary school and they touched each other and
Yeah,
they were kids.
yeah.
So every disease that came in went around, and that was one of the issues we had with TB. Because, again, I got criticized, and a lot of the FinCom got criticized for increasing the healthcare budget in Milford for visiting nurses to make sure that we had enough time that nurses went to homes.
Yeah.
And the immigrants that were there, because they, no fault of their own, they came from areas where TB was not eradicated.
Well, we've had issues with, when you grow up with the same group of kids, basically, you develop immunities to certain other
Herd
viruses.
immunity.
Yeah. And then when you go off to camp or to college, you're now with different people from all different, could still be all Americans, but still for other communities. They don't have the same immunities that you might have. And we've known this for hundreds of years, because that's what happened to the natives, especially in the Caribbean.
Well,
that
when the
Spanish
Europeans
and
came over and wiped out native populations.
because they had no immunity
Smallpox
to it.
and
The Europeans had some immunity built up. So it's and what happens, we had a testimony from some young people who came into the legislature to talk to us. One kid had lost his arms at the elbows and one of his legs at the knee because of an infection that he got for sharing bottled water at the sports field. And and he hadn't been back. There's a vaccination for it, although the current federal government doesn't like vaccinations, but there's a vaccination to prevent you from getting these, which can be sometimes fatal illnesses.
The discussions that came about was you're spending more money on immigrants because of TB, and I was like, wait a minute, let's be cold and not take any of the emotion in. One, you should do it because they're living in Milford, they're Milford kids, you take care of Milford kids. But two, if you don't help them eradicate the TB,
Some of our kids are going to get it.
your grandkids,
Yeah.
your kids are in the same room, and something like TB is going to spread throughout everybody.
Well, that's what's happening right now in the United States with measles.
Measles,
Measles was, for all intents and purposes, was
Gone.
eradicated. But now, because some people won't get the vaccination, which has been proven to be very safe, when they get it, and then other people, if they haven't been vaccinated, are likely to get it. So,
and again, things like the mumps, measles, rubella.
Yeah.
You just turn around and say, wait a minute, hasn't it proven itself safe? How many hundreds of millions of people?
Yeah.
I don't understand the anti-vax movement.
I don't either.
Because
Yes.
I look, and I do my little research, I go to PubMed, I go everywhere, to find out the link between the vaccines and autism. I
You know,
can't find
There's
any.
no evidence of it. People say, and we've got, there's, studies every now, I read a lot of the health studies, and they, sometimes they'll say, well, coffee's not good for you. Now there's another study out, coffee is good for you. Same thing with drinking. But a lot of stuff is in moderation. It's not so bad. Then there was once they said any alcohol is bad. Now there's more recent studies that said, well, some amount is okay. It's not a risk. Even the issue with fluoridation in the water. If you over-fluoridate, obviously it's not a good thing. But if you have it properly.
But how many
regulated,
decades have we been adding fluorine?
probably, well, 50 years at least, if not longer than
So
that.
over 50 years, you would think we've learned the therapeutic level that's
Yeah,
acceptable.
There are a lot more people that have their own teeth today, or at least some of them. And it's, and it's the dentists talk about it. It's not that they're just self-serving. They're trying to tell you, this is all right, this is good, and it reduces the time you have to go see the dentist in the process. So part of it is it makes it more common and affordable for everybody, and then it's up to the individuals to take care of their own teeth and health and stuff to make sure they don't.
Now, the Dignity Alliance that pays you all sorts of huge millions of dollars per
Yeah.
year.
My wife wishes that were the case, but
Well, you
because-
can tell her that we'll suggest they give you a 50% raise.
yeah, that'll be good. It'll be
50% of zero.
zero. Yeah.
What
Well,
is the goal of Dignity Alliance?
We came together, actually, I wrote an op-ed during COVID in the Worcester paper, saying that nursing homes were were the breeding place for some of it, certainly not all of it. But because a lot of older people who have their health has been compromised are in a congested area, basically, it spread more easily. Plus, the workers who serve those older people, because they can't make enough money in one place, would be working at 2 nursing homes or other places. And so they were coming and going, so they were.
So now you got
Yeah,
cross-contamination.
so that was going, so a friend of mine who's a former secretary of Elder Affairs called me and said, look, we want to get together a group to try to push back on some of the policies the state's doing that aren't positive, to respond to us. Because it was at one point in the Baker administration, they had thought about, well, we'll move people out of nursing homes, and that's where we'll take care of the overflow that the hospitals are facing. Well, first off, moving them out isn't fair. Where are you going to move them?
Well, who's going to take care of them?
Yeah. And so, and then as what happened in the soldiers' home in Holyoke, was they mixed people who were healthy with people who had
And
COVID.
COVID.
And then they all got sick, and a number of them died, sadly. So we said first, we advocate for older adults, people with disabilities, and caregivers. And part of that is we need to reform nursing homes, their finances for one, but also the way that the staffing levels have to be a certain amount to provide proper care for the people that are in them. We want people to, as people want, as often as possible to stay in their own home or in a community setting and get the care they need at their home, or at least be or to help them get to the care for the transportation. And we advocate for, there's an issue with people who need wheelchairs. If you have one of the wheelchair, somebody that is seriously disabled needs an automatic, an electric wheelchair. To get the companies that own the repair businesses, only two in the United States, and they're private equity companies, they don't keep parts in stock. You have a broken wheelchair, you tell them about it, and they say, well, we'll have to order for it. They'll order, and it might take weeks, sometimes months.
What do the people do in the interim?
That's the problem. The wheelchair is their freedom, their life. And so there's a couple of bills in the legislature to try to fix that. But it's, the companies that own the wheelchairs don't want anybody to get it too fast.
Now, people who want to learn about the Dignity Alliance, don't you have meetings twice a week or?
We have actually, there's a coordinating committee of about 15 people. Mostly are the chairs of different work groups that are on it. I chair the legislative work group, so I'm on it, plus I'm a co-founder. There were 4 of us that started the group. And we meet every other week, and in the off weeks, we have a meeting that's open to anybody that's a participant in Dignity Alliance. And it's all on Zoom. So if it wasn't for Zoom, which is one of the good things that came out of COVID, we wouldn't have been able to organize. We're statewide.
So how do I find out how to log into the Zoom meeting?
There's the dignityma.org is the website, and you can sign up.
Okay.
Plus, we do Paul Lanzikos, who's the former Secretary of Elder Affairs, who's our coordinator, does I don't know how he puts the time in, does a newsletter that's a very detailed newsletter. Every week it comes out electronically, but it has information from other media sources about older adults or people with disabilities.
But it all starts at dignityma.com.
.org.
.org. Yeah. Dignityma.org.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you stayed active, because some of us, I'm 69 now, so I'll be...
You're just a kid.
Oh, God. I'll be taking advantage of some of the programs you're putting in, I hope.
Well, I tell some of the legislators when I'm talking about different bills that we're advocating, I said, I'm trying to find a place for you. So, that's safe and comfortable, or to keep you out of a nursing home altogether.
Yeah.
So these are things that we're doing to.
Well, thank you for everything you've done for us over the decades. And here we are. Must be a decade since you decided to leave.
It's about just over 10 years now.
And you're still helping out our seniors and our residents of Milford.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get you to come back once a year to give us an update.
Okay, that sounds good.
And to our 6 loyal viewers, thanks for joining us. This is one of the critical topics, whether you're getting near where you're going to take advantage of the programs or not. May God bless, and may tomorrow be a healthier day than today. Thank you.
Not too long since I've been home, been running all my life